Welcome, my friends, to continued coverage of GP Pittsburgh. We are live from Pennsylvania. My name's Riley Knight, joined by the world number one, Reed Duke, round 12, beginning before your very eyes, my friend. And it is Paul Dean and Jeff Walker who are going to be on your screens for this round. It is a classic standard matchup here, Reed. We've got black-red aggro in the hands of the Canadian and Walker here on white-blue approach. A matchup very much a definitive one in the format that we've come to know.
That's right. We just took a look at the metagame breakdown. We talked a lot about the options available to rogue deck builders and home brewers, but that's not what we're seeing here. We're just seeing the two pillars of the format, a red Chain Whirler deck against a blue-white Teferi deck, the classic matchup of Standard, one that we've been seeing all weekend and has been determining the course of the tournament. And here we have two players at 10-1, each with their respective archetype. They're going to do battle, Paul Dean versus Jeff Walker.
Walker going to take care of that second Scrap Heap Scrounge with an Essence Scatter, but Dean has got off to a nice aggressive start here with a pretty respectable curve out, 1-2 into another 2 and a tap land. Paying a real cost, this black splash. It's not for free, Reed. I mean, we have Canyon Slayer, we have in some cases Cinder Barons as well coming in, and this can really mess with the mana development of the black-red style decks in contrast to the 24 Mountain full-on red aggro.
I agree with you. The costs are real, but the rewards are not trivial either. And you can see Paul Dean's turn 3 play Scrap Heap Scrounger met by Essence Scatter. If you're Jeff Walker, you got to be thinking, man, this is a tough way to do it. I'm countering, I'm spending a card 1 for 1, but that Scrounger is just going to come back potentially at instant speed after I use a Settle the Wreckage or Fumigate. With a slow deck like Blue-White Approach, it's a real threat.
Perfect answers for Jeff Walker as he continues to put his best foot forward. Heart of Kieran hits the bin thanks to that negate. I can tell you, Jeff Walker, relative newcomer to high-level Magic here. This is only his second GP, his first day too, so he's doing pretty well for himself. Paul Dean, on the other hand, a man who, well, I'm sure many of you are familiar with, made the Pro Tour, made his first Pro Tour top 8 at Battle for Zendikar, Pro Tour Battle for Zendikar, I believe, and he's made 3 GP top 8s as well, so well on his way with a pretty impressive resume already.
Man, I'll tell you, to be 10-1 in your second Grand Prix, it took me a lot of tries before I ever made it that far in a Magic tournament.
Well, Jeff Walker's really picked his moment here, and he's been rewarded for it, as we've said. Down to 7, however, Reed, he's under a lot of pressure, although handling it pretty well. He's had, some nice disruptive elements. Seal Away, negate, Essence Scatter, but he needs to answer these onboard creatures as well. Looks to do exactly that now with another Seal Away. Some of the cheap disruptive options available to Blue-White has really put the deck right at the front of the map. Oh,
definitely. We talk a ton about Teferi. That's the exciting addition from Dominaria. But a lot of these subtle adds, like Seal Away as a cheap reactive removal spell, defensive card, the deck doesn't function without cards like this. It's not a big flashy card, but it's something you need. You want to see it in your opening hand, particularly when red aggro is a hallmark of the format.
So Paul Dean is actually going to dig himself down to 17 in order to cast Unlicensed Disintegration on his own Soulscar Mage. Couple of reasons for that. Obviously useful having a creature in the yard to bring back a Scrap Heap Scrounger. But the second reason, maybe going to turn on that Hazard at a turn early by getting rid of an otherwise dead card in Unlicensed Disintegration.
That's a great point. It's something that you look at it at face value and you're like, wow, this is a horrible play. You're spending your own removal spell to kill your own creature, dealing yourself damage while you're doing it. Something that you would almost never do under ordinary circumstances in a game of Magic, but that's what these very polarized, these very extreme decks and matchups, they lead you to make unusual plays like that, because Paul Dean knows from his experience in the format that, first of all, Unlicensed Disintegration probably has no targets in my opponent's whole deck. Second of all, I need to find a way to be returning this Scrap Heap Scrounger because I might not resolve another spell for the whole game, and I need to keep cracking in with my Heart of Kieran with my other creatures.
Chandra Torch of Defiance, the play now for Dean. We'll see if Walker's got the answer to it. He had to spend that Settle the Wreckage to remove the lone Heart of Kieran, and that has resulted now in a Syncopate for 2, meaning that Paul Dean is, well, being pretty constrained on threats, although this Hazard's going to get busy. knock Walker down to 2, and that means that Paul Dean, all he has to do is untap and he wins the game, Reed. So what Walker can do, I mean, he just cycled away a cast out, so he better have something good here.
Yeah, that's funny. So perhaps his best hope would be to play a Teferi and minus on the Hazoret, because he still has to cross his fingers that Paul Dean doesn't have a haste creature or a burn spell, but if he does survive the turn, then he would get to untap with Teferi and potentially amass a defense of counterspells in hand and take the game from there.
Teferi in hand here, a foil one no less here for Walker. And looks like Reed, yep, you're calling the shots as usual, my friend, and away goes the Hazoret the Fervent, 3 from the top. Scrap Heap Scrounger comes back, however.
Aha, and Paul Dean proves to us why that play is not going to be good enough. The Scrap Heap Scrounger in the graveyard. Remember, we did see him use Unlicensed Incineration on his own creature to set that up.
Yeah, so look at that. Next level plays from Paul Dean. The Canadian knew exactly what was up. And otherwise, I mean, yeah, you look at that play and you go, geez, that is pretty bad. Take 3, kill my own creature in response to the seal away. But, hey, it effectively won in the game a turn earlier than it would have otherwise. And Jeff Walker has to hit the sideboard with a heavy heart, because Dean, having won game number 1, puts him in a great position to capitalize on an early, strong finish there, Reed.
You said it, Riley. This blue-white approach deck, it's probably the best Game 1 deck in Standard, in part because of that dynamic that we've been really driving home of the players have to put so much removal to deal with the red decks. Even the red mirror, you're packing Unlicensed Disintegration, a Braid, things like that. Those are just completely useless cards in Game 1 against blue-white approach. So the blue-white decks hope to win that game. Things get a little bit tougher when the opponents get to upgrade their removal spells into relevant cards, but if you can just steal one of the 2 sideboard games, that's usually the plan. Here we see that turned on its head with Paul Dean actually winning Game 1, and now Jeff is going to have to take 2 games in a row the hard way, where the opponent doesn't necessarily have dead cards anymore.
Paul Dean is a pretty established professional Magic player by now, and I got the chance to catch up with him yesterday. I mean, super nice guy. I mean, a Canadian, so obviously that goes without saying, but like even for a Canadian, dude, like this guy is, he's always got a smile on his face, except when you see that game face on. Look at that, he's not here to make friends in the feature match area. But Rita got the chance to catch up with him yesterday, and you know what he told me? He's playing this black-red aggro list, and we're calling it black-red aggro. 0 copies of Bomat Courier.
Wow, that's unusual, because it looks like he's made a lot of other concessions to speed, to maximizing his 4 copies of Hazoret the Fervent. I would expect that a deck like this would have the 1-drop creature, but no, you're right. He's got no Bomat Couriers.
Yeah, he's replaced it with another 1-drop, a slightly less powerful one in the abstract, I would say. He's got 4 copies of Shock.
Yeah, now that's one thing that's very notable about Paul Dean's deck is he has 4 Shock and 4 Lightning Strike. Now, those are cards that have a special role in Standard, because they do count, for me at least, as those cheap defensive cards that are going to give you fighting chance in the red mirror if your opponent has a fast start. However, they can go to the face against blue-white approach. So Paul choosing a configuration of burn spells to both have a lot of answers to early creatures on the opponent's side, but also as few dead cards as possible when he plays this matchup, blue-white approach or blue-white control.
I mean, we're not pretending that Shock is a great card in this matchup, but it is better than a Stone Cold Blanksky. You're just looking at that Abrade and wishing they'd play a Torrential Gearhulk, and a Shock at least, it goes upstairs, and sometimes, as we saw, Jeff Walker was on 2 life last turn, and a Shock would have been enough to seal the deal there. So an interesting approach from Paul Dean. It's obviously paid dividends for him. I don't think that everyone in the room would necessarily be in agreement, Reader. I'm interested, what are your thoughts? Bomat Courier, I would have thought, is just too good against control.
Bomat Courier is, I would have to say, the best card against white-blue control for a handful of reasons. The first and most obvious is just that it can come down and start attacking before the shields are up in terms of counter spells. And when you let the blue-white player counter the first spell that's cast in a game, that's just playing into their hands. That's exactly what they want. They want to untap on turn 3 and have no threat on the board. They want to have 20 life. But the Bomat Courier comes down, and then you force the white-blue player to play from behind. You put them to the test of each turn. Are you going to play your seal away? Are you going to defend yourself? Or are you going to pass with counterspell mana open? And making the control player make difficult decisions like that is how you beat them. The other reason is that Bomat Courier can just be a powerhouse card draw spell. I mean, the blue-white deck sometimes spending 4 mana to draw 2 cards with something like a Hieroglyphic Illumination or a Glimmer of Genius. Oftentimes you see Bomat Courier 1 mana to draw 5 cards, sometimes even more than that. So the red player is looking to empty their hand, restock with the Bomat Courier, and that plan just works very effectively against a blue-white deck that doesn't have all that much cheap removal.
Looks like Walker's... Oh, sorry. Excuse me. Go on.
But Paul Dean, without the Bomat Courier, he's doing it the more honest way with 2 and 3 drop creatures and a couple of burn spells.
Yeah, his curve goes all the way up to 5. The Singleton Glorybringer joining 3 copies of Chandra, 4 copies of Hazoret. So, yeah, a different take on an established archetype here from Paul Dean, and so far it's done well. Looks like Jeff Walker and Paul Dean ready to go to game number 2. Let's have a look at these openers here for these 2 players. Well, they are playing a pretty... geez, they're making it hard for us here in the booth, Reed. Not getting a great look at either of these hands. But it seems like the players are content enough, or are we still in the tank about it? Well, it looks like Paul Dean's got some thinking to do. He may have a tricky decision. And Walker as well, so we don't have a clear-cut decision from either of them. Oh, no, okay, Walker's going to go down to 6. Dean, on the other hand, seems set with his 7. So this mulligan is going to punish Jeff Walker. He is on the draw against... Oh, sorry, he's on the play. But against mono or against black-red aggro, you need every inch you can get, because they can have some very, very punishing draws.
Yeah, mulligans can be pretty tough for these control decks because you need to have your land drops, you need to have your early defense right up the curve, and you need to have some kind of powerful card drawing spell once the dust settles. And just those things that I mentioned, that requires a lot of resources. When you're on the play and you're down a card, you really need everything to fit into place correctly, or else you're going to miss a beat, and Paul Dean's black-red aggro deck can punish that pretty severely.
I guess the glimmer of hope for Jeff Walker is the fact that Dean did tank a fair bit on his keep, so maybe his keep is a little loosey-goosey. We will see in due course. This one looks a little bit better for Jeff Walker. He's at least got a turn 2 play in Syncopate, so it looks like he's going to keep Scry, and that one's going below deck. So we are off to the races now with Jeff Walker and Paul Dean, the matchup of the tournament, of course. White-blue approach, playing black-red aggro. Dean taking out game number 1 off the back of Hazoret the Fervent and a bunch of other very powerful threats, of course. Walker's answers weren't able to keep up to them. We'll see if that changes with game number 2.
So as far as black splashes go in the red aggro deck, Paul Dean's is relatively light. He's packing just 2 duresses in the sideboard, which, while that's a super, super strong card against blue-white control, you did mention the cost of having a lot of non-mountain lands in a deck like this. And Paul Dean just finding what he believes to be the right balance of not playing too many clunky lands, like just 1 Cinder Barrens, just 1 Swamp. So he doesn't want to draw multiples of black cards and lend himself to getting clunky hands, but he does want to have a well-placed duress like this one to help round things out and make it tough on the control player.
Reed, I'm a big proponent of people countering discard spells. In this situation, Jeff Walker didn't obviously have the option to syncopate this duress, but I think that, generally speaking, not enough people negate opposing duresses. What do you think about that? Is there a general rule people can apply if they've got a counter spell in hand and someone casts something like a duress, a Thoughtseize, Inquisition? Sure.
Well, I would say the general rule is you do want to counter it, because you're giving your opponent the option, of course, to take away your negate or your disallow, but they also get to see your hand, and they get the choice. If they want to take something else away, you're not protecting your spell by negating the duress. However, there's exceptions to every rule, and in a situation like this, Jeff Walker had both a blink of an eye and a seal away, which he could spend his mana on alternatively. And you see that Paul Dean, even after resolving the duress, declines to attack with Scrapheap Scrounger for fear of that seal away. So it depends exactly what you want to spend your mana on.
Of course, as we said, that Syncopate wouldn't have countered the duress as it was, given Paul Dean's open mana. But yeah, it's something that I don't think happens enough. I think information is really something that you should strive to protect in games of Magic. And yeah, you should. If you've got a hand that is negating 5 creatures and they duress you, negate it. Don't show them your hand. Don't give them that information. Keep guessing, keep them on their toes. Well, Walker facing the music right now. We've got Ragavan coming in with the Skyship Raider, in addition to that Scrap Heap Scrounger. And Walker, I mean, this is a big attack for 6. It's no joke, Reed. I mean, he's going to be hard-pressed to respond. What's he got? A blink of an eye. Doesn't do a huge amount.
I've enjoyed this match so far. I like watching a player like Paul Dean play an aggro deck, but play it in a way where he's careful, he's pacing himself, he's picking his spots, and not just rushing every creature into the red zone as quickly as possible. You saw him not attack with the Scrap Heap Scrounger because he would have gotten it sealed away, and then this turn, when it's more beneficial to him, he makes a larger attack. So the combination of patience, looking for opportunities, lining up the right threat against the right answer, and making things as inconvenient as possible for the opponent, that's what makes a really good black-red aggro player.
Walker cycles away a cast out. We'll see what he's found here. With 5 mana, could be a Teferi. Yep, yeah, it is indeed.
But not exactly the kind of Teferi that you really want. You want Teferi on a safe, stable board, not when you're facing down 3 creatures and only have 2 mana available to you. This Jeff Walker, the best thing he can have is a Seal Away or a Blink of an Eye. We actually know he has Blink of an Eye from that previous duress. But still, he's got a lot of attackers coming at him, and Teferi might die, or he might take a large chunk out of his life total, depending on what Paul Dean does and has in hand.
Walker lowering the shields at least a little. Teferi, a great play on turn 5, of course, when you can back it up with Seal Away, especially. I mean, this was a card that I highlighted very early on when it was sort of first previewed in conjunction with Teferi. It was very clear that these cards were good. I mean, we talk about Teferi being overwhelmingly powerful. Without the inclusion of something like Seal Away in this list, they don't have fantastic 2-mana removal options. You'd have to go into black for something like Cast Down.
Yeah, that's right. Seal Away really is a great pairing with Teferi, and Blink of an Eye, a card that I wouldn't necessarily have thought of as a constructed all-star, but the combination of, just the versatility of it, being able to blink an enchantment, an opposing planeswalker, use it as defense on turn 2, and in a situation like this, just putting your opponent to a tough spot with how many creatures they want to send at Teferi, how many they want to send at you. It's a powerful card.
Looks like Blink of an Eye is going to soak up 3 damage effectively by bouncing that Kari Zev.
Jeez, and look how tenuous this position is. With the prowess on Soulscar Mage, all it takes is 1 instant of any sort for Paul Dean to be able to kill Teferi, and there he has it. Lightning Strike, 3 damage to Jeff Walker, 5 damage to Teferi, so this works out really well for Paul Dean. I can't blame Jeff. He was behind the 8 ball here and had to make a pretty bold play, and he was saying, you know what? Paul doesn't have an instant. If he's got a couple lands in his hand, I'm going to untap with Teferi here. So I like him picking his spot, giving himself a chance to get lucky, but this time it's not going to work out. Paul Dean had him one-upped.
Didn't quite find what he needed there, and Paul Dean did have the goods, so we'll see how things progress from here, because Walker's certainly on the back foot. After having lost Game 1, I'll remind you as well, Dean is looking to capitalize on his Game 1 victory, and we'll see what's in store. But this board that he's built up, I mean, it doesn't, a 1-2, a 1-3, sure, but they hit pretty hard, they hit pretty fast, and Walker's on 13, but I imagine that number's going to fall. It's going to start tumbling pretty quick, Reed.
It's also telling Riley that this is a sideboarded game, and Paul Dean still had Lightning Strike in his deck, so that goes to show you how much he values the direct damage against control. There's a lot of subtleties about Lightning Strike, being an instant, pumping up the Soulscar Mage, finishing off with Teferi, and often these blue-white approach decks, they plan to stabilize at a low life total, so the surprise 3 damage can win a lot of games, and Paul Dean seems to value it quite a lot, both building his deck with 4 main deck Lightning Strikes and keeping in some number after sideboarding.
And look at this, an attack just with Kari Zev from Paul Dean as he cycles away a second Canyon Slayer, and I love this. You were talking before about very precise, almost surgical play here from Dean as he really looks to play around, everything that Walker could possibly have here, and that, I mean, still poking through damage while not opening himself up to a blowout from Settle the Wreckage.
It was a very conservative play. I worry maybe if it was a little bit too conservative, as he's now allowing Jeff Walker to spend his mana on something else rather than protecting his own life total. But yeah, I mean, you said it. Paul Dean's a really careful player. He doesn't want to walk into anything when he feels he's ahead. but you don't want to give these blue-white approach decks too much breathing room. So walking that fine line can be a challenge, and it's not always clear exactly how much you want to send it into the red zone.
Walker found a copy of Torrential Gearhulk off the top. So that's going to be able to flash back something like Blink of an Eye, or, well, no, that's actually it. Can't really do anything with a Syncopate, to be honest. So let's send in the Goblin Chainwhirler just to mix things up this time, says Paul Dean. And Walker has a pretty easy response here if he wants to gobble up that Chainwhirler, but that does... Oh, no, sorry, that was crewing the Heart of Kieran. Okay, there are the attacks.
Do you recall, Riley, if Paul Dean had seen Torrential Gearhulk with that duress earlier in the game?
No. No, Walker just drew it off the Memorial to Genius, so it is unknown, man.
Well, Paul he's playing as though he expects Torrential Gearhulk. You see him attacking with only the evasive creature, the Menace on Karizev, and the flying on Heart of Kieran.
Excuse me, I've embarrassed myself. He did have a Torrential Gearhulk in hand, and he drew a second one. Excuse me.
Okay.
Yeah, making a fool of myself. So the reason Paul Dean may be playing around that Torrential Gearhulk read is because he knows he has it in hand, and I have, well, yes, once again, opened my mouth to change feet. I do apologize.
That's okay. We all do it, and it is within Paul Dean's range to play around a card like that even without seeing it, but in this particular case, he knows for sure, based on the earlier duress. We did talk about that information management. A player of Paul Dean's caliber is going to make very good use of seeing his opponent's hand and not walk into anything.
So Dean carefully examining what Walker's options are with that Torrential Gearhulk that he's always known about, and we always knew that he always knew about it as well. And another Memorial Genius here for Walker. Dean going to commit a Chandra to the board. We'll see what Walker's response is here. Man, I tell you this much, this white-blue approach deck is not a good Torrential Gearhulk deck.
No, and in particular, some of the card choices of Jeff Walker, you see he has a Syncopate in his graveyard.
Yeah.
If that was virtually any other counterspell legal in the format, he would be able to flash in Torrential Gearhulk and counter this Chandra, but as it is, the Chandra resolves, and now Gearhulk, with not that many options in the graveyard, he's going to have to force the action somehow because he can't just sit behind and let this Planeswalker run roughshod on the battlefield.
The fact of the matter is there just aren't that many great instants in white to flash back with Torrential Gearhulk. I mean, obviously there's the immensely powerful Settle the Wreckage, but Torrential Gearhulk impresses me so much more in blue-black control, right? Where you can flash back Vraska's Contempt, for example.
Completely agree. Vraska's Contempt, probably the best pairing with Torrential Gearhulk. Though we've seen Commit Memory be pretty good as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yep. End step, draw 7. Win the game 20 turns later. Yep. That's the Oliver Chu special.
Wow, so Jeff actually chose to bounce a Soulscar Mage with his Blink of an Eye. I think this is because he wants to attack Chandra and force Dean into chump blocking. However, you got to figure that Paul Dean has a great chance of untapping with Chandra Torch of Defiance here.
Well, Walker thinking long and hard about how he's going to proceed here, what his next steps are going to be. Looks like we've got another Teferi coming down. And going to go immediately downstairs to get rid of Chandra the Torch of Defiance.
Okay, so now he's flipped the script, and he's the one with the Planeswalker. He's going to force Paul to attack both creatures to kill the Teferi, and he'll get to eat one with Torrential Gearhulk. Have to imagine Paul will oblige there. You definitely don't want your opponent to untap with a Planeswalker in a close game like this.
Canyon Slough. Dean, we've seen him with burn spells already. Maybe he can leverage one of these cards, Reed, to get rid of the Teferi. But no, it looks like it's just going to be the all-out attack. So, unfortunately for Dean, his Goblin Chainwhirler gets gobbled up there, replaced by another Soulscar Mage. Away goes Teferi. And now, Walker, unless he doesn't have... I mean, how many cards has he got in his graveyard? Enough, right?
He has 6, so if he decides to bin this one, he will transform the Search for Azcanta.
Right, well, seems like a pretty decent thing to be able to do here. Having to think about it, not obviously the most obvious decision.
Man, Riley, if you think back to the beginning of this game, we were a little worried about Jeff Walker with the mulligan on the play. We talked about how badly this blue-white deck needs its resources, its land drops, curving defensive removal spells up the curve, but he was able to hit pretty much every step right up to this Torrential Gearhulk, which even the threat of it stopped Paul Dean dead in his tracks. And now here we have him at a reasonable life total, sitting behind a nice blocker and a transformed Search for Azcanta, and he's primed to take this game over, particularly if he can have an answer to this Chandra Torch of Defiance.
So here is the Chandra Torch of Defiance, and I think we may see an activation of Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. Whoa, wow. Not doing that in response there?
Yeah, I feel the same way as you. I would have definitely expected Jeff Walker to dig towards a counterspell there.
Snap that off, my goodness. Carry Zev off the top now from the Torch of Defiance, but I wanted to come back to the fact that Walker so highly prioritized flipping his Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, right, that he binned it to Ferry in order to do it. That's how highly he wanted that card draw engine amongst his lands.
Yeah, wow.
Settle the Wreckage comes off the top now for Walker as the Torrential Gearhulk is sent Chandrawards, but Dean with the block. 1-2 jumping under the bus here. Dean's going to draw. Got a Mountain in hand. I think he's found a Goblin Chain Whirler. Or is that a Hazoret maybe? Didn't get a great look at what Dean's draw was there, but a Hazoret would certainly be a nice one for him here.
So this game getting more and more interesting with Jeff Walker having revealed a Settle the Wreckage off of his activation of Azcanta last turn. But here Paul Dean might be able to get rid of the Settle, clear the way. No, not even close to clearing the way here with a second Settle and that Torrential Gearhulk both sitting in hand.
So
Paul Dean far away from being able to attack.
All the copies of Torrential Gearhulk, all the copies of Settle the Wreckage that you could possibly hope for. More than you could shake a stick at here, my friends. And yeah, it doesn't look like Dean will be connecting anytime soon if Walker has anything to say about it. Now, Dean does know that the way is clear for this Hazoret, which, can poke through damage in and of just by itself, right? Just discarding cards to its ability. It's slow, but it only requires, 4 activations, coupled with Chandra?
Yeah, if I'm Paul Dean and I see that hand, my thought process immediately shifts to, okay, how am I going to deal 8 damage without attacking for the rest of the game?
They've just got like an Ensnaring Bridge, right?
Yeah.
It's just the virtual moat.
Chandra's a good option for that. Hazoret's a good option for that. Hazoret particularly great because it can block the Torrential Gearhulks and defend the Chandra.
Goblin Chain Whirler was, however, the card. Unfortunately, Dean wasn't able to find his Hazoret.
Okay, well, that's 8 down to 7, getting a little closer.
Playing those cards very close to the chest, Dean was. Difficult to get a good look at exactly what he was working with. But yep, Walker down to 7, as we say. And a -1/-1 counter goes onto that Torrential Gearhulk. It's cut down to size a little bit. It's a 4/5. And Walker now, an activation of Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, as you would expect, beginning to pull further and further ahead on cards, exactly where you want to be. And a Glimmer of Genius as well. Well, 2 of, how about that?
Fantastic way to spend his mana. That's just what he wants.
As the pressure sort of has been brought down a little bit here. Scries 2, both of them going below decks. He's just churning through cards. He's looked at 8 cards this turn, 9 cards. Unbelievable.
Even though it's getting to a late game situation where he is digging for particular threats, card quantity still matters a lot. And even something like an untapped land here is going to allow him to hold up both Torrential Gearhulk and activate Azcanta. So even into this late stage, the blue-white approach deck still needs its cards, still wants its land drops, and the Glimmer of Genius helps him have his cake and eat it too.
Looks like Dean's going to line up a triple block against the oncoming Torrential Gearhulk. He recognizes that Chandra is a mission-critical threat for him to defend here, Reed, and as a result, we're going to have this skinny 98-pound weakling Torrential Gearhulk perhaps hit the bin after this triple block.
I love the play from Paul, recognizing that if his creatures can't attack, this is probably the best value he's going to get out of them. He needs to protect Chandra, and next turn he's going to tick up to 7, put Jeff Walker in the situation where emergency he needs to find cast out or disallow, or else the Chandra emblem is going to make short work of him.
Yeah, geez, actually, that'll be brutal because if Walker gets hit down to 5 next turn with a Chandra activation, and then the ultimate pops off the top the next turn, then all Dean needs is 1 non-land card. And he's playing non-land cards. He's playing quite a few of them, in fact. So Walker says go. Nothing else for him to do just yet. Torrential Gearhulk, negate, settle the wreckage in hand for Walker. Chandra up to 7 now. Out comes the D12 and a Doomfall. What are you doing with this one?
I'm casting it. At this point, it's still, Paul Dean just picked up another mountain, so only 2 lands in hand. He's really all in on this Chandra. So it's difficult to imagine him piecing together 7 damage with the resources he has available to him, particularly because time is running short in the face of that Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. But Doomfall can clear the way in Jeff Walker's hand and give Paul Dean a little bit of a better chance of embleming that Chandra, and for me, that's his route to victory. That's what he wants here.
So Dean does indeed cast the Doomfall. That immediately gets negated here, and Dean shifts it back to Walker. He opts to hunt through that Sunken Ruin once again, and a Syncopate.
Still no answer to the Chandra.
This could be very problematic here for Walker. I mean, he's got another couple of bites of the cherry because he's got his draw step and another activation of Azcanta to find something like a cast out. But my goodness me, Reed, we could see a Chandra activation here in just a very few moments here.
Syncopate and Seal Away both horribly ineffectual here because Paul Dean has way too many lands for Syncopate to be effective, and he's not planning on attacking anymore. His plan has shifted to his Planeswalkers and Chandra emblem.
Walker examining the graveyard. As we know, he does have Torrential Gearhulk in hand.
Yeah, he's just thinking Torrential Gearhulk is supposed to be my trump card. It's this super powerful mythic rare.
Jeez.
The be-all, end-all in control. Why can't it do anything in this situation? Why isn't there a disallow or a commit memory?
I think it just comes back to what I was saying before about this deck not being the best Torrential Gearhulk deck in Standard. I'm not saying anything about the fact that this... I think White Blue Approach is great. I think it's a terrific deck, but I just don't think it uses Torrential Gearhulk to the best of the card's ability. Pairing it with hard removal like Vraska's Contempt is where you want to be, I think, and Walker's deck just doesn't do that. So he needs something here because Chandra...
Oh, and he found it.
Oh, my goodness me. Oh, my goodness.
At the midnight hour.
Jeez, just in time. The teacher is just closing the door on the classroom, and he is slamming his bum down on the seat there, ready to learn, because I tell you what, that was a last-minute reprieve there, and Paul Dean can't believe it. So, carry Zev now. We're going to get on the front foot here, Reed. Start to crack some skulls, get into the red zone. Walker, of course, with access to 500,000 settle the wreckages. There's a lot of wreckage for him to settle. 1 in hand, 3 in the graveyard. 5 in his deck, 2 in exile, a couple in his pockets. So I don't know how many times Dean's going to connect. And with Walker on 7 as well, he can't afford to take too many hits here.
From Paul Dean's perspective, his plan is dismantled. So his easy way to victory was to use that Chandra. Now that that's not available to him, he has to find a different way. And it's going to be tough because with so many lands, cards in hand, and the Azcanta on the opposite side, Paul knows that with each passing turn, victory gets further and further out of reach. So he's going to have to make aggressive but careful plays, and he's going to have to force the action in these next couple of turns, because the more time he gives Jeff, the more cards he lets his opponent see, the more mana he lets his opponent spend, the harder it's going to be to actually force through damage.
Torrential Gearhulk flashing back a Glimmer of Genius finds Walker a Teferi in addition to a basic Plains. And the Torrential Gearhulk having to block the Ragavan there, obviously unable to block Carry Zev with Menace. 5 mana, we are going to see the hero of Dominaria come down now. And let's see what's up with Teferi.
And here that super powerful trifecta of Teferi, Azcanta, and Settle the Wreckage in hand, making it really difficult for Paul Dean to do just about anything.
So Walker, his hand isn't fantastic, but he can certainly change that a range of ways. He's drawing up to 4 cards a turn. Untaps Ipnu Rivulet. And it's back to Paul Dean now, who finds a Chandra off the top, but I wouldn't think that's going to be enough at this late stage. Here's Chandra.
Well, it looks like Jeff's only answer in hand is Syncopate, which he could counter that with Syncopate, but that means leaving the shields down, tapping out of Settle the Wreckage mana.
Yeah, right, because the Syncopate is going to cost him 7 mana, so instead it's going to be Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, and he's found an Invoke the Divine?
Yeah, he elects to take that, which can answer the Heart of Kieran and buffer his life total, instead of taking Sorcerer's Spyglass, which would have been a slower answer to Chandra. But he's just figuring, okay, I'm in good enough position. I got my Planeswalker, my Torrential Gearhulk. If I can just make sure I don't die, the answers will fall into place eventually.
Pianala's going to bring along a little Thopter Buddy here. And, well, look at this. The Flavor Judge is holding up, and we've got an 8, a 9, 9.5, and an 8.5 for the Flavor play there. Chandra summoning Pianala, her mother.
With Heart of Kieran in play, nonetheless. I think that potentially was a little bit of a misstep from Jeff Walker. He should have responded to the Pia with Invoke the Divine, because what can happen now is if Jeff points Invoke at Heart of Kieran, Paul can crew in response and then sacrifice it to Pia's ability to fizzle the life gain. Could be a potentially game-changing play here.
So here's the Invoke the Divine, and we're going to see exactly this happen here. And so now Walker, punished for a slight misstep, because that 4 life that he would have gained off of the Invoke the Divine now is not forthcoming, Reed. Really great pickup. Wow. Of course, there was no opportunity for Walker to respond after having seen the Pianala. He needed to respond to the Chandra activation, but still.
Actually, that's not true, because you still have to cast the spell.
Excuse me.
Yeah, it doesn't go straight to play. You cast a spell, and he can respond on the stack.
Here's a Lyra Dawnbringer now. This is a big play for Jeff Walker. Usually pretty difficult for any straight red deck to overcome. We'll see if Dean has got some kind of an answer to it. But 5 toughness, enormously important in the face of an oncoming Chandra Torch of Defiance. And it looks like Dawnbringer is going to rule the skies for the time to come here. Dean ticks his Chandra up. Let's have a look at what's on top here. It's a Mountain going to do 2 damage to Walker. He's down to 4. But he's stabilized magnificently here.
Particularly with the Settle the Wreckage in hand. Paul has a lot of cool options available to him, including sacking the Thopter to make Lyra unable to block, but knowing about the Settle the Wreckage in hand, he's back to that square one where he's not going to be able to force through combat damage and just needs to piece it together somehow between Chandra, Hazaret, burn spells, whatever it might be.
This game is just, mate, we have seen so much of what is good about this format.
Excellent
on display in this game here. I mean, there has just been so much back and forth here. Some really tight play from Paul Dean and Jeff Walker. Some interesting little missteps here and there and everywhere that have kind of, broken up the texture of this game. There's a lot to like about what you're seeing on your screen today, ladies and gentlemen.
I agree with you, Riley. It's possible to make complaints about, potentially lack of diversity, about these 2 pillars of the format being a little too strong, but when you get gameplay like this, it's hard to really take too negative of a view of the standard format, because, if you have to play this matchup, but you get close, interesting games, that's at least something.
So, Teferi tucks away a Rekindling Phoenix. Lyra Dawnbringer comes across. In addition to that, Torrential Gearhulk going to buff the life total of Jeff Walker a little bit. Okay, a little tricky trick there with Pianala, as you said, to ensure that the lifelink ability essentially fizzles there.
I'll point out something else about this game, Riley, which is that Jeff Walker still has to win 2 games in the allotted amount of time here. You see him picking up the pace, because yes, he's going to win this one, or he's likely to win this one, but it's still going to take a long time. Then he's going to have to win game 3 in 8 or 9 minutes or something like that if he wants to advance to 10 or 11-1.
So Dean now with a Hazaret on the top. He does have the option to cast this card, or he can just exile it for 2 damage. Looks like he's going to take the latter option there, Reed, and walk it down to 2. You would think, however, an attack now with a Pianala. Look at that, getting busy. And Walker finally, at long last, ladies and gentlemen, say it ain't so. There's the Settle the Wreckage that's been in his hand for 500,000 years. Dean goes and finds a Mountain. Happy enough to do so. Walker down to 2. Geez, we've seen a real barnstormer on display today. Here's another Pianala now for Paul Dean.
Does Jeff Walker have enough to syncopate? He can syncopate for 8, and that's exactly how many lands Paul Dean has untapped.
Oh, no, we saw him counting them out. Oh, hello. as Count of the Sunken Ruin instead, cast out. Is that going to be good enough?
So he can cast out either the Chandra or the Thopter token. If he can actually connect Lyra against Chandra in this combat step, I think he's effectively won the game because his life total will go up to 7, and Chandra will get out of range of being able to emblem.
Wow, and Walker trades in his Teferi against that Thopter token, sends in the creatures here, both of them coming upstairs.
I love the play.
Getcha,
and now he's going to cast out the Chandra, and with Settle the Wreckage in hand, he'll be safe from the creatures, and now it's just a matter of winning the game with as few minutes off the clock as you can.
So here we go now with Dean. Glory Bringer off the top. In they come. Another Settle the Wreckage is enough to go. Game number 3, and I tell you this much. There have been some people flapping their gabbers about this standard format, my friends, but they can stick this game in their pipe and smoke it because that one was an absolute roller coaster ride, Reed. So much to take away from that. Not even this match. Just the game, dude. Wow.
That was a fun one.
That was a huge one. And we've got 9 minutes and 20 seconds for these guys to find a resolution to game number 3. And you would think that in this situation, Paul Dean is the one who, you'd be getting behind because with his black-red aggressive deck, he is much more likely to be able to steal a quick victory.
We should take a moment, Riley, to talk about what's at stake in this match.
All right.
We are here in MTG Red Zone, which means we're in the meat of day 2 here, down the stretch, seeing who's going to put themselves in position to fight for top 8. These players both have a great record, 10-1, 13-2. That's going to be in for sure into the top 8. And this is a relatively small Grand Prix, under 1,000 players, which means that 12-2-1 with good tiebreakers, and these players both had a great start, likely to be good enough also. So even though normally a draw is really bad in tournament Magic, in this particular situation these players find themselves, it's not a disaster. They don't have to panic if they move to 10-1-1 here because they'll still be looking at hoping for a 2-1 record from there. But you mentioned it, Paul Dean with the black-red aggro deck. It's pretty likely that if he's going to win, it's going to be a fast win. Whereas Jeff Walker facing the opposite problem that he's looking to stabilize in the first 8 minutes of the game and then ask himself, now what? How is he actually going to deal 20 damage? So we'll see both players, in particular Jeff Walker, playing at a nice clip, seeing how this develops and if they can actually finish in the 8 minutes left on the clock.
Now, just to nip an issue I know is going to come up in the bud here. Of course, you can see on your screen there we have a judge standing by, and unless my dichromatic protanopia is lying to me, Reed, that judge is dressed in red.
Yeah, that means the burgundy shirt indicates one of the head judges. We have 3 here at Grand Prix Pittsburgh. These are the judges that, highest ranking. They can answer the appeals. They get to cast high-level magic spells if they want to. But, there's one monitoring the feature match area.
And that means that any and all concerns for slow play are being very, very carefully monitored here, which, of course, can be relevant when we have situations like this. Players tied up, heading into the later stages of a round. So don't you worry, my friends. We've got all bases covered down in the feature match area here at Grand Prix Pittsburgh. In the booth, my name Riley Knight, and, of course, joined by Reed Duke, the world #1 player. And right now, Paul Dean looking to capitalise after having won game 1, going down in the second game in an absolute marathon match there for Jeff Walker to finally get up. It was a real tour de force from him, and we'll see if Dean can rally. He's got off to a slower start, it has to be said. A pair of Soul Scar Mages, all he's got to do by turn 3, but Walker with no responses so far.
I'm going to get Paul Dean a Christmas present of one more Mirage Mountain. He's I always love watching him because he always plays Mirage Basics.
Oh, does he?
Whatever deck or color combination he has, but looks like he might have just come up short here. He's got one Urza's Saga to round things out.
Oh no! See, that would have escaped the notice of many, Reed, myself included. But you got those eagle eyes, my friend. I've recently done a similar thing. Actually, I got my hands on a huge bunch of Lorwyn basics. And they're my basics, my go-to basics of choice now. They just remind me of those illustrations you used to have in your fairy tales when you were a kid. And I just love them.
I was a huge fan of Lorwyn, the flavor and the function of the cards.
I'd love to be able to go back to that plane one day because I think just there's so much I mean, I've worked in primary education. I'm a big fan of children's literature, and so much of the flavor resonates with that, the fairy tale magic you get lost in as a kid, and I'd love to see more of that.
Definitely.
Dean's going to search out some more of these Mirage basics now, thanks to that huge Settle the Wreckage from Jeff Walker.
Yeah, meanwhile, we have an interesting game shaping up here. The Settle the Wreckage takes care of the creatures, but again, Paul Dean with these Chandras, they're just the powerhouses of the post-sideboard games. Jeff Walker, he's going to really hope he has Cast Out at the end of the turn to answer Chandra, but if not, that thing's ticking up quickly, giving Paul Dean a huge advantage and threatening to just be a game winner on her own.
Yeah, I don't think... Jeff Walker's just not meaningfully contesting this Chandra at the moment. And that's going to be a huge problem for him if he can't find a way to deal with it. I mean, Cast Out is a nice, clean answer. We've seen it before. We may see it again. But a Glimmer of Genius is going to help Walker find what he needs. A little constrained on blue mana right now.
You'll also, you bring up a great point that he's got only one blue mana, which means that if he can't find a second untapped blue land and Paul Dean ticks up to 7, he's just going to go for that emblem right away. No fear of disallow. But there it is. There's the island.
Yeah, there's an island there. And Walker, I don't think we've seen him with too many copies of Disallow so far, but he is playing the full 4.
Yeah, that might have been, a defining factor of that second sideboard game is Jeff may have sideboarded out all or some of his Disallows. And that really does change the dynamic of those super long games of if your counters are only the soft counters of Syncopate and Negate Essence Scatter, it does change the way your opponent can play against you when the game goes that long.
Teferi comes down, perhaps another answer there to the Chandra Torture Defiance, but at the moment a little pressured by both the Penala and the Thopter token. Walker with 2 mana available. He's got a nice full grip as well here, Reed. And Dean now activates Chandra upstairs, finds a Scrap Heap Scrounger.
Pretty interesting. Remember, there's a rules change that you can no longer deal damage to opposing planeswalkers with Chandra Torch of Defiance.
Yeah, a bit of a nerf there for Chandra.
Yeah.
And Dean now. Geez, look at that. The John Finkel treatment.
The hands on the head.
The old temple massage. There was an interesting bit of analysis to the Twitch chat for the Pro Tour. Reed, I don't know if you got across this actually. We were chatting about this behind the scenes in team coverage. And there is a very, very direct correlation between when John Finkel appears on camera and the not like this Twitch emote. It is, it spikes. It spikes like you wouldn't believe. And yes, I'm looking over at the Twitch chat right now, and we are seeing another huge spike in the in the not like this stocks right now.
Wow, look at this fascinating attack from Paul Dean. He's splitting his attackers in a way to set Teferi to exactly 3 loyalty, which prioritizing dealing a lot of damage to Jeff Walker, still allowing the Teferi to minus to get rid of the Chandra, but ensuring that it's going to die on the way out. That was a really challenging attack step for Paul Dean with a lot of different options, and the one he settled on was very, very intriguing to me.
So Walker now, bereft of a Teferi. Dean likewise bereft of his Chandra. And a Duress.
If that can strip away the one Settle the Wreckage, then the coast is clear for Paul Dean.
So you can look at Walker's hand again. It's nicely stocked. Look at that. Search for Azcanta, Negate, Torrential Gearhulk.
It turns out he has a duress-proof Settle the Wreckage in hand the form of Torrential Gearhulk.
Yeah, of course, of course. Dean taking a moment to write down the contents of Walker's hand here. I mean, what are you looking at?
It's such a tough spot for Paul Dean because he doesn't want to send in too many creatures and get blown out by Gearhulk Settle, but if he attacks with too little, then Jeff Walker just gets to Gearhulk Glimmer. So we could see Dean attack with just the 2 flying creatures, perhaps? I'm not sure what he's going to do here.
I can confirm for those of you at home as well, it's not just Paul Dean who's getting a temple massage. Right now, Reed Duke is in the not like this position.
I'm stressed out, Riley. This is just too much for me. I'm not even playing.
Wow, what a showcase of this standard format we've seen so far. I mean, there is a lot of depth to these waters. You know, calm waters they may be on the surface, my friends, but I tell you what, there are just that many things going on beneath the surface to the intricacies of these matchups, especially one that's as played out as this, Reed. It's incredible that we're still learning about it today.
We've seen a lot of great games on camera this weekend, a lot of cool decks, but I have to pick this one as my favorite so far. I think this has been the closest, most interesting match, a lot of decisions that could dictate the game going down a couple different paths. And here we are, 0 minutes on the clock, deep into game 3. I don't know who's going to win. It could be a win, a loss, or a draw for either of these players.
We'll get confirmation as to when time is called, and we can confirm that yes, indeed, time has been called. This is turn 0 of extra turns between Paul Dean and Jeff Walker. You would think if anyone's going to walk away with the W here, Reed, it's going to be Paul Dean. His opponent on 7, a huge board built up, but Walker has got a hand that is just full of jet fuel.
All right, so look at this. Attacking with only Scrap Heap Scrounger, Pia Nalar, and 7 men. I'm going to not pull the trigger on Settle. I'm going to play Gear Hulk, Glimmer. Then Paul Dean can sacrifice his Thopter token to make the Scrounger unblockable, pump it 3 times, put Jeff Walker down to 1 life. But it looks like Jeff not even going to cast the Gear Hulk yet at all. He's going to see how much mana Paul Dean invests and what exactly he needs to do to defend himself.
So 1 activation of the fire-breathing ability on Pinalar. Looks like Dean is thinking about a second one as well. Of course, it's not too late for Walker to flash in that Torrential Gear Hulk and take the Scrounger out of the picture here. But that's a sizable investment, especially in the face of something like Glorybringer.
Definitely. The Gear Hulk does represent his main way of combating these creatures. Granted, he can Glimmer and try to find something else, but it's not that easy. If he takes some damage here, doesn't get any creatures off the battlefield, you face a situation, now what?
Here is the Torrential Gear Hulk, and we are going to see some wreckage settled, although only a very small amount of it, you would think here, as Paul Dean has an unlicensed Disintegration as well for the Gear Hulk here, Reed.
Wow, okay, so that puts Jeff Walker down to 4.
Dead to the Glorybringer.
No longer has access to Settle the Wreckage. So yeah, he's got to find an answer to Glorybringer, but even then the Pia and the Thopter with the fire-breathing ability can get the job done.
So Dean putting himself in a position to take this one home. He's got 2 more turns in which to do it, and Walker's just got to cling on for dear life.
Yeah, and don't forget there's a Chandra Torch of Defiance looming on the top of the library.
Oh, that's good for another 2 points. An expensive shock, but hey, you'll take it. So Walker, we had a look at his hand before. He's got a Teferi. There's a Negate as well, I think, as he has a look through the graveyard. Yep, Negate there as well for him. And so here comes the Teferi. See if Walker can find something else that he needs off the top of the library. Gets that D12 out, rolls it up to a 5. Let's see what's up.
Oh, this might be hope I draw Settle.
Turn number 2. You can see the beringed hand of BJ Ogden there taking care of things. That guy is metal as you could believe. Here is now a carry Zev off the top for Paul Dean. That's going to be the second last draw step for him for this match. Has a quick look at the cards in Walker's hands. What a tense one, right down to the wire. Can Dean stitch together the win here? Business mode activated, and look at that. John Finkel, eat your heart out. He's learned from the best. Walker, cool, calm, collected.
He doesn't want to give anything away.
Oh no.
A lot of the way this turn is going to play out depends on his ability to sell or not sell, having settled the wreckage in hand.
He's got that poker face, Reed. And Dean is just like, hey, you got it. But I've got to get this done. We're going to see an attack. 1, 2 creatures. Glorybringer and the Thop to come across. Jeff Walker looks through the hand and extends the other one. That's the game of Magic, ladies and gentlemen. Paul Dean takes it out in an absolute nail-biter right down to the wire there. 2 and 1 to the Canadian. And I tell you what, Reed, we have had a real treat on display in this, the 12th round of GP Pittsburgh.
I love it. I just love it.
I mean, it is literally our job to make you as invested and excited in the Magic you're seeing on your screens, but I tell you, that one sold itself, huh?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, just super close, fascinating gameplay there. Lots to think about from both players. I loved the torrential Gear Hulk giving Jeff Walker options, but not all the options.
Yeah.
You know, he was a little bit limited, and Paul Dean was able to capitalize on that, force him into a corner, and there you saw on the last turn, he had fought through the Gear Hulk, no more Settle the Wreckage, and 2 lethal flying attackers did the job.
There was a lot to take away from that, and look, I've been accused more than once of liking the sound of my own voice, but that is not the only reason I'm going to watch that one back, that round there, because, Reed, I think there was a lot to take away from what we saw. That's just about that for our 12th round, my friends. We're going to be back after this with more live magic coming your way from GP Pittsburgh. We'll see you back here soon. Don't go anywhere.